Welcome to the Basic Training Podcast. This is a weekly live recording of a course led by Dr. Robert Forney to several men at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The main topic of this course is how to be a man of God in today's society.
Welcome to Basic Training Podcast. This is a continuation of my talk about sexual intercourse. In this podcast, I want to deal with problems with sexual response and how to fix them. I want to warn that this is adult content. I'm going to be describing male and female genital anatomy explicitly and describing function of each of the parts. This material is appropriate, but it's anatomically and physiologically explicit. I don't deal with purity. The sexual problems with sexual response we're talking about is within marriage. It's not before marriage. And I'm not going to discuss sexual perversion. It is a sin, but it's not going to be addressed. In the last podcast, number 25, we talked about sexual desire, sexual intercourse, its purpose. We described it biblically from the Song of Songs. I warned of to beware of the temptation to search for the perfect sexual experience. And I went through the physiology of sexual response in the 4 phases that have been identified by medical researchers who specialize in sexual response and treating individuals with difficulties. Those 4 are arousal, excitement, orgasm, and resolution. With this podcast, in sexual response and its problems, only the first 3 of these phases are discussed. The resolution after orgasm is not considered to be part of a problem. So, what are the problems with sexual response? Well, according to a sex researcher named Helen Kaplan, all the phases have a common generator, but each has its own separate circuitry. These stages are correlated with separate physiological functions in both the nervous system and the genitalia. The physical distinction is made to facilitate the identification of specific pathophysiological responses and malfunctions so that specific treatments can then be applied. So the 3 phases, the first 3 of the 4 phases we discussed in the last podcast, the first is arousal, or as Dr. Kaplan describes it, as desire. This involves the libido. The libido originates in the basal ganglia of the brain. The problem of a low libido is the most difficult of the problems to treat. And there are individuals that have low libido. I'll discuss the causes of these in just a minute. The second phase is excitement, and here the inability to have an adequate erection is the problem. Erection is characterized by a reflex vasodilation of the genital blood vessels in both men and women. Women also have an erection of the clitoris. Erection enhancement medications are medications that correct the defect in this vasodilation or enlargement of the veins in the genital organs. Orgasm is a reflex contraction of certain genital muscles, and there can be difficulties with this as well. So what are the causes of this? Problems are said to arise when an inhibiting switch turns off any one of these physical responses. Such inhibitors vary between men and women and from person to person. So what are some short-circuiting inhibitors? With desire, very often it's emotional. fear, anxiety, hostility, anger, resentment, depression, all will cause walls to go up emotionally, and this can be a big inhibitor for this first phase. For excitement, the most common problem is anxiety, and very often this anxiety is of a sexual nature, and often this has to do with prior bad experiences. Both the phase one excitement or desire have this in common, that when young people are abused sexually, they very often in adulthood will have these fears and anxieties. They don't know where they come from, but it's very difficult to treat. Another cause of anxiety and excitement is taboos. Many people grow up through suggestions, through conversations, through things they've read, who find certain activities, certain sexual activities, to be a big turnoff. And there can be anxiety that can be caused because of that. With orgasm, in the last podcast I was talking about the importance of the imagination. So a problem is when there's excessive self-consciousness. In other words, the inability to let go can be a big problem. Negative thoughts, words, and actions of the spouse outside the marital bed is also has a very negative effect on sexual response. So any of these tensions and unresolved conflicts between husband and wife will serve as an inhibitor. Poor self-esteem and or bitterness also destroy intimacy. Often these negative feelings show up first in sexual intercourse. Another thing that can be real negative is to use sex as a weapon. Sex was designed by God to bring two people together for oneness, for their mutual pleasure, for their spiritual unity. But ironically, it can be and often is used as a weapon to frustrate, disappoint, reject, or pay back a partner for wrongs, whether these wrongs are real or they're imagined. This can be and often is done subconsciously, with the person doing it not realizing their sin. So these are some of the problems. So how do we fix these? Well, we fix them also with three areas, three different things. This is explained thoroughly in a very excellent book that I recommend by a husband and wife team, Dr. Ed Wheat and his wife Gay. And the name of the book is Intended for Pleasure, Sex Technique and Sexual Fulfillment in Christian Marriage. There's another book, Love Life for Every Married Couple, also by Dr. Wheat and by another woman, Gloria Perkins. These are both still available. So Dr. Wheat says there's three areas that need to be dealt with for fixing these problems. And I would say these same three areas, even if a couple don't feel that they have a problem, but they would like to improve their sexual relationship, I would suggest that I agree with Dr. Wheat that these three areas should be addressed. So the first one, he says, is that the couple should obtain complete and dependable medical information. And what he means by this is that they understand their own and their spouse's sexual apparatus and how it's supposed to function. Beginning with the woman, and in the handout, which you can download from the YouTube site for handout number 26, there are diagrams. First of all, the external female genitalia, and then I want to discuss the internal genitalia as well. Okay, so beginning at the top, that would be moving from the abdomen down, closest to the abdomen, is a tiny structure called the clitoris. Clitoris comes from a Latin word which means that which is closed in. It is analogous to the penis in a male. It is about 1 inch long. It's a shaft, and it's hidden within a sheath. The peak of the labia enclose the clitoris. It's about 1 inch above the vaginal opening. Its outer end is a small rounded body the size of a pea called the glans. The male penis has at the end a glans as well, although much bigger. Glans in Latin means acorn, and it refers to both the shape and the size. A fold of skin called the prepuce, or clitoral hood, covers the glans. The clitoris has been called the trigger of female desire. It is the most sensitive point for sexual arousal that a woman has. Sufficient physical stimulation of the clitoris alone will cause an orgasm in nearly all women. Very often, men who don't understand this, if there's one thing that I think men need to understand, it's this, that a woman requires stimulation of the clitoris. A lot of men don't even know that it exists or where it is. It's small. And if a woman is herself not educated and helpful in this, he may never find it. Depending upon the position in which sex occurs, there may be no contact with the clitoris. And this can be the reason why a woman is not achieving orgasm. There are many women who've been married many years, have had sex often, and have never had an orgasm. And probably it's because the clitoris has not been stimulated. Okay, the labia majora, or major lips, are a mound of flesh over the vagina opening, keeping objects out of the unstimulated vagina. After sexual arousal, these lips lie back and flatten. They're not nearly as sensitive to stimulation as either the clitoris or the labia minora. Labia minora is the next, would be the small lips. These are normally hidden within the labia majora. They do have nerve endings and are sensitive to stimulation. There are two parallel folds of smooth, soft tissue connecting to the hood of the clitoris, above and beside the vaginal opening inside the labia majora. Research has shown that gentle stroking of the labia minora give a very pleasant sensation to most women. The movement of the penis in the vagina causes friction, tugging, and pulling. These sensations are carried to the clitoris due to the attachment of the labia minora to the clitoral hood. The last thing, and this is not really external, it's internal, is what's called the G-spot. The G-spot was named for a German gynecologist, Ernst Grafenberg. It's a thickening of tissue just inside the vagina, 2 or 3 inches on the upper or anterior wall. That would be the wall closest to the belly. This spot has a high density of nerve endings, which when stimulated lead to strong sexual arousal, powerful orgasms, and even the potential for female ejaculation. But it is also controversial. Some consider it to be an extension of the clitoris. Many women do not experience vaginal orgasm at all and need clitoral stimulation if there's going to be an orgasm. So this it's actually considered to be normal. Sex researchers report that very many women, maybe over half, are unable to achieve a vaginal orgasm. Continuing with the internal genitalia, the vagina is elastic and muscular, extending from the vulva to the cervix. The vagina allows for intercourse, it also allows for birth, and it channels menstrual flow out of the woman. The cervix is at the end, the interior most structure in the vagina, and the word means neck. And so it's the neck of the uterus, and it is the lower part of the uterus. It's cylindrical in shape, again about 1 inch long, and it contracts with the uterus during orgasm, and when it contracts, it draws sperm inside. And so this is very helpful for fertility. The uterus is the major hormone-responsive organ, and it's where the fertilized ovum is received and where the baby develops. Its lining is called the endometrium. Some women have a condition called endometriosis, which is a disease of the endometrium. So the endometrium is the wall of the uterus. The blastocyst, which is when the fertilized egg begins to divide and grow, this early stage is called a blastocyst, and the blastocyst implants into the endometrium. And for the baby to grow and have a healthy pregnancy, this implantation needs to occur. Some birth control will not prevent fertilization, and so there is a baby, but what some of the drugs do is to prevent implantation. And if implantation doesn't occur, then the baby's not going to grow. The fallopian tubes are tubes through which the ovum or egg passes from the ovary to the uterus. Fertilization actually occurs within these tubes. There's 2 ovaries, one on either side, and so there's 2 fallopian tubes. There's just a single uterus, so the egg comes from one of the ovaries or the other and passes through the fallopian tube, and the sperm has to make it from the vagina up through the cervix into the uterus and then into the fallopian tube, and it's in the fallopian tube then where fertilization occurs. There's different reasons for this. The conditions within the fallopian tube are ideal for this fertilization to occur. The fertilized ovum then undergoes critical development while it's in the fallopian tube, and then it continues through the fallopian tube into the uterus, and as it becomes a blastocyst, then it implants. And these are all the things that are happening to create a pregnancy. So the ovary is where the eggs are produced, and there are eggs in the ovaries, and its ovulation is the release of one of these eggs, or more than one if it's going to be a multiple birth. This occurs in one or the other ovaries, and this occurs each menstrual cycle. And we'll talk about menstruation next. The menstrual cycle, we can say, is a month, but it varies in length. It can occur within a few days, or it can take as long as 30 days or longer. Menstruation does not occur in young girls, but it starts in puberty, say about 12 years. And it continues until what's called menopause, which is the pausing of menstruation, which occurs in most women between the ages of 40 and 50. So what that means is that a woman is able to be pregnant from the beginning of menstruation until, and that's also called menarche. Menarche is when this begins, and until menopause. So from, let's say, 12, could be 10, 12 years until 40 or 50 years. One part of the menstrual cycle, which occurs for 2 to 3 days to a week every 26 to 32 days on the average. The lining of the uterus is actually shed, making way for a new lining to form. This is accompanied by the loss of blood over several days. This loss is actually a sign of good health. Some months in a woman may be heavier, meaning more blood loss, than others. Very often, a woman feels dirty during this time. Her emotions may also be much more labile during this time. Day 1 of the menstrual cycle is counted as the first day that the menstrual flow or the bleeding begins. The lining of the uterus thickens to twice as deep compared to the last day of the previous menstruation. This menstruation occurs when the supply of the female sex hormones estrogen and progesterone are discontinued. If a fertilized egg has implanted during the middle of the cycle, then progesterone would continue to maintain the lining, preventing menstruation. So when menstruation occurs, then we know that there is no pregnancy from the time before. There is no medical reason why intercourse should not occur during menstruation. However, many women feeling dirty during menstruation because of this bleeding may have less lubrication and or less desire because of the interruption in their hormone supply. Menstrual blood is not harmful, and the penis causes no damage to the vagina during menstruation, as some women fear. Pregnancy is, of course, not possible during menstruation. It normally occurs rather during ovulation, when the egg travels from the ovaries down into the fallopian tubes. The sperm has to travel up, as I've just said, and penetrate the egg. The sperm penetrates the egg. A female egg is the largest human cell, but it's still smaller than a dot. So these are microscopic structures, both the sperm and the egg. Of course, the sperm is even smaller. Ovulation typically occurs 10 to 14 days after the end of menstruation. So if menstruation is 2 or 3 days and we start counting on day 1 with the beginning of bleeding, then that means that the woman normally is able to conceive and become pregnant after about 12, 13 days from the beginning of her last menstruation, and that then would continue for another 3 or 4 days. So this is a woman's anatomy. Now, speaking to men, I think you know all there is to know about male anatomy. Well, I'm going to describe it anyway. Here are some of the important things. I'm going to start with the scrotum. The scrotum, or the ball sac, holds the testicles, or the balls. It also has nerves and blood vessels, and it is cooler than the body. And the reason it is cooler than the body is that is required for sperm to develop. The testicles produce sperm, but they also produce testosterone. And this is an important masculine hormone. Women also produce testosterone, and testosterone is important for a woman's desire as it is also important for a man's desire. But this all comes from the testicles, or the testes. The epididymis is a long coiled tube that transports and stores sperm and brings sperm to maturity. So the sperm form, but they're immature, and they travel through this tube from the testes, and this tube is a coiled tube. And while the sperm is in this tube, the sperm is brought to maturity, and the sperm is also stored there. Then there is the ductus deferens, or sometimes called the vas deferens. The ductus deferens is also a tube. It's a muscular tube from the epididymis to the urethra. Now, the urethra is the tube through the penis through which both urine and sperm travel. And so the ductus deferens is a muscular tube. It will contract, and it goes from the epididymis to the urethra. So we have sperm starting in the testicles, going through the epididymis, becoming mature, then entering the ductus deferens, and the next structure is the seminal vesicles. Seminal vesicles produce fructose, which is a sugar, for the sperm, and they also hold most of the volume of seminal fluid. In the last podcast, I said that there are stretch receptors believed to be in these vesicles, and so when the vesicles fill, a man experiences more desire. When these vesicles are emptied, then that desire wanes. The next structure, moving towards the urethra, is the prostate gland. The prostate is below the urinary bladder, and it produces prostatic fluid and adds this fluid to the seminal fluid. There's then a little pea-sized structure on the sides of the urethra called Cowper's glands. These secrete a lubricant, so they lubricate the tube, and they also neutralize the acidity of urine. So this is in the urethra. So when a man pees, that urine is acid, but this Cowper's gland will neutralize the acidity, and this is very important for the sperm. Then have the ejaculatory duct, which is a union of the ductus deferens and the duct of the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles have this fluid that they're creating, and it joins with the sperm coming through the ductus deferens, and it passes through this duct. This is also a muscular tube. The urethra then runs through a part of the penis called the corpus spongiosum, and this is an important feature that I'll mention in a minute. So classically, the penis is divided into three parts. The glans, or head of the penis, which has a foreskin or prepuce in uncircumcised males. With circumcision, it's this prepuce or foreskin that is removed. The glans has, if it's would call it like a helmet, the corona is the circumference at the bottom of the helmet, and the corona is basically the base of the glans. The corona is very sensitive to stimulation. The second part is the body of the penis, and the body of the penis is composed of loose, elastic skin that accommodates changes in size during an erection. Then there's a neck, which is just below the glans, and in the neck is a structure called the frenulum. The frenulum is probably the most sexually arousing area of a man's genitalia, together with the corona. The corona is also very important. The frenulum is on the underside of the neck, and so it would be like facing the ground if the man is standing. The next part is the shaft. The shaft of the penis has three columns running from the root to the glans. And within these three columns are thousands of spaces that fill with blood. One of these columns is called the corpus spongiosum. And so spongy, it is, all three of these columns are like sponges. That is, they have, if you can imagine a sponge that has these little cells, and what happens to make an erection is those little cells engorge with blood. The corpus spongiosum, body spongiosum, is a single column on the bottom of the penis shaft, whereas the corpus cavernosum are two columns that sit on top of the corpus spongiosum. So all three of these fill with blood during an erection. That's what causes the erection. And corpus spongiosum is important because it manages, while it fills with blood, it also manages to keep the urethra open. This means that the sperm is able to traverse it. Otherwise, if the structure was different, it might squeeze the urethra and prevent that. So then the root is the third part of the penis, the glands, the body, and the root. The root is that part of the penis that attaches to the wall of the abdomen. Now, there are diagrams of this in the handout. Dr. Wheat says the first thing that is necessary is adequate and complete medical information, complete and dependable. Okay, so the second thing that he advocates is a biblical view of sex. In the Bible, sex is described as being undefiled in marriage. This is important. Many enter marriage thinking sexual desire, if not sex itself, is either a sin or dirty or disgusting. This alleged Victorian view is that to be holy, one must be celibate. The Catholic Church has fostered this view unwittingly by the celibacy vows of priests and nuns. Many girls have been told by their mothers that they will not enjoy sex. So this needs to be corrected by doing Bible study to show, no, it is not dirty. No, it is for your pleasure and for your husband's pleasure. Further, biblically, we learn that individuals, both men and women, have God-given sexual needs. Scripture commands spouses to meet each other's sexual needs. Young widows are told to marry so they will not burn with sexual desire. So yes, even women have sexual desire. We are warned not to cheat our partners by withholding sex, that we should only abstain for a season and then only by mutual consent. Thirdly, the Bible indicates that we relinquish our authority over our own bodies when we marry. Our bodies in marriage belong to our mates. Dr. Wheat counsels, quote, I suggest that you make every effort to provide your mate with a good sexual release as a habitual part of your life together. Amen to that. So then the third thing, complete medical information, a biblical view of sex, and the third thing is the right approach to sexual intercourse. So partners should view sex as an opportunity for genuine lovemaking, making or building of love through giving and receiving in ways that are physically and emotionally satisfying for both. This means caring about the partner throughout the day. Dr. Wheat quotes a woman who said, quote, what can a Christian wife with a Christian husband do when the husband seems only to want sex and doesn't care about her during the remainder of the day? He forgets her birthday, doesn't care when she has emotional needs, and won't take any spiritual leadership in the family, close quote. So a husband is to care, not just want sex. Sex without signs of love is sure to create feelings of resentment, not response from your partner. This is Dr. Wheat's quote. I put it in all caps. Sex without signs of love is sure to create feelings of resentment, not response from your partner. Thirdly, avoid criticism, which always hinders emotional closeness. Quote, it is not your responsibility to lecture your partner on the biblical commandments we have just discussed or to insist on obedience to them. If your mate disappoints you, you must be careful not to say by word or action anything that will make him or her feel like a failure. Even one slip of the tongue can undo weeks of progress. He's speaking there to individuals who are having difficulty sexually. Fourthly, husband, and I'm quoting Dr. Wheat again, husband, your wife needs a romantic prelude to sexual intercourse. You may not realize how much your wife desires this or what it means to her. Women must be aroused emotionally as well as physically. They enjoy the closeness and intimacy of sex. They enjoy gentle touching and total body caressing done in a meaningful, not mechanical way. They want their husbands to appreciate their entire body, not just provide some breast or gentle fondling as a means of quick arousal. Fifth, many women do not need or desire a sexual orgasm every time. Husbands often do not understand this and feel like failures unless their wives experience an orgasm every time. Dr. Wheat reports that studies have shown that highly orgasmic women have had fathers who were not passive towards them, but who had been actively involved in caring for them and protecting them, not permissive, but setting standards and limits. So Dr. Wheat has a checklist of hindrances that wives report to their enjoyment of sex. In other words, things that wives report hinder their enjoyment of sex. Number 1, a husband's stimulation is mechanical rather than spontaneous. 2, a husband is more interested in perfecting physical technique than in achieving emotional intimacy. 3, a husband seems overly anxious for his wife to experience an orgasm instead of simply wanting to please her. 4, a husband fails to provide stimulation for his wife to have another orgasm after intercourse and does not realize that she desires this even if his need has been met. 5th, the husband is repetitious and boring in his approach. 6th, the husband is insensitive to his wife's preferences. And 7th, the husband seems to be deadly serious about sex rather than having a fun, affectionate attitude about it. So the goals for our sex should be, 1, that it's positive, it's relaxed, it's pleasant, it's romantic, it's physically satisfying and emotionally satisfying. Husbands should concentrate on pleasing their wives rather than pushing towards their own sexual release first. God is our example. We should have the same attitude with our wives, making plans to prosper her, to give her hope and a future, desiring that she comes to us looking for support, calling on us to answer her needs, wanting to listen to her, etc. These are all things that God does for us. Now, I have done several, maybe many, marriage retreats, and during these times I have had some surveys that I've made of women and of men. And so I want to close with some tips that I've received from women giving tips to their husbands, or giving tips to men about how we should be loving our wives. And then I have some tips given by men for women. I believe there are some women listening to this podcast as well, and so these are some tips for you. So first of all, what do women say that men should do regarding loving their wives? You'll notice that several of these are repetitious with what Dr. Wheat has said. Number 1, positive loving. Be romantic. Be genuine. Notes, cards, phone calls, flowers. Number 2, women love to be pursued. They want to be wanted. Pursuing implies being valued, not like a dog pursues. Several women said, but sometimes we like to take the initiative. So this pursuing doesn't mean that the man always takes the initiative. Number 3, have lots of date nights. We discussed that. I've discussed that several times in previous podcasts. Number 4, privacy and security. Invest in a good lock on the bedroom door. Eliminate fear that children will hear, see, interrupt. That's why overnight trips away from home without children in a hotel are good, one woman told me. Number 5, involve all 5 senses in romance. Smell, such as cologne and scented candles, those that are attractive to the woman. Sight, firelight, a man who's well-dressed, a clean room, sounds, quiet, romantic music, soft, caring voice, touch, loving caresses, lightly caressing the jawline, the hair, holding hands, and taste, a clean, fresh breath, bathed body, etc. So all five senses. Next tip. Simply put, cleanliness is next to godliness. Smelling good, looking clean, crisp, clean shirts, good oral hygiene, etc. Next, talk. Compliment us on the way we look, smell, feel. Do this all week long. Look into our eyes and tell us things like, I like your eyes because... Do not speak bluntly at first, rather gently and romantically. And the last two tips, be gentle and be patient. Be patient because a woman's sexual arousal is slow. A man is fast, a woman is slow. So a man has to develop patience. Okay, so here are some tips, advice by men to women, to their wives. Number one, be enthusiastically available for sex. That means not just grudgingly willing, but actually looking forward to it and showing enthusiasm for it. Number two, focus on your man. 3, keep yourself up. Take care of your own body. 4, be creative. Try new things. Make him excited. The way you dress, the way you move, etc. 5, remember, men are stimulated visually. See the items above. 6, don't nag. 7, don't put kids or your family first. Your family meaning brothers and sisters, parents, etc. So in general, in closing, I have 7 general things. Number 1, remember that sex problems are sometimes red herrings. Understanding that impotence is a common problem at every stage in marriage is the first and highest hurdle most couples have to clear. Talking about the problem can be reassuring and lessens the anxiety for both partners. In fact, the more both partners worry about a problem, the more intractable it becomes. However, wise couples recognize that impotence can also be a wake-up call, a signal of stress somewhere in the relationship. Impotence, the inability to have an erection. Number 2, don't save affection for the bedroom only. Couples whose sex lives bring them the most happiness eroticize their lives. That is, they give affection physically and verbally through the day in different ways. They touch. Whether it's reassuring or frantically passionate, touch makes the difference between making love and having sex. Touch is a reflection of what you feel inside. You can convey desire, appreciation, delight, and a sense of safety, as well as boredom, resentment, and anger. 3, make time for love. Sexy wives know that lovemaking is a habit. The more you do it, the more you like it, and the more you like it, the more you do it. They make lovemaking a top priority, and if that means scheduling sex, so be it. It won't be any less exciting just because it's planned. Sexual excitement feeds on itself. Just do it. Make time for sex. 4, talk every day. Even if it's just 10 minutes in the morning and 10 at night, voice your love. Call each other pet names. Remember to say goodbye and goodnight. Be sure that you don't fall into the mind reader trap of assuming your partner knows or should know what you're thinking and feeling simply because he or she loves you. Those in healthy, sexy marriages make a point of expressing their feelings and their attraction to each other on a regular basis. 5, kiss often. And I'm not talking about a perfunctory peck on the cheek, but a deep, sensual, teasing kiss. Many longtime couples rarely kiss at all, going straight to intercourse when they have sex. And that's too bad. 6, learn what pleases. Know what your wife likes and doesn't like in bed and communicate your own likes. And finally, have adventures. Instead of sex in the same way all the time, behind a locked bedroom door. Add variety in time, place, position, etc. Keep eyes open during sex if you usually have them closed. Sometimes leave the lights on, turn them off. Sex is important. It's given by God for our pleasure, for our unity, for the procreation of children, and it is deeply satisfying and something that we ought to be pursuing in marriage only. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the love you put in our hearts. Thank you for the sexual creatures that you've made us. Lord, I pray for those listening to this podcast who may be having difficulties sexually. Lord, I pray that you would give them patience and that you would heal whatever it is that is the problem. Lord, I pray that our sexual lives would bring glory to you and bring sparkle to our eyes for each other, and may the happiness in our lives convince others of their need for you. We pray that Jesus is glorified in all of this. We pray in his name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Basic Training Podcast, taught by Dr. Robert Forney. This podcast is available on Spotify and the Google and Apple Podcast apps, also on the Basic Training YouTube channel. If you want to contact us with any comments or questions, please email basictrainingpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless.